Well, welcome to this week's Bible study introduction. Last week we looked at the four Gospels and did a kind of introduction to them, how they were similar and how they were different. This week we're going to look at the portrait of Jesus in the four Gospels as a teacher. I'm very fond of caves. I'm not quite sure why that is, but I do like descending into them, and there's just something about them that catches my imagination. And this was no more true than when I visited the Holy Land and they took us to one particular site where there was a cave, and the person explaining it says it's the sort of place that rabbis would have gone with their disciples to sit and discuss things. And I could, as it were, close my eyes and imagine Jesus sitting on a rock in the cave with the disciples around him while he explained to them various things, and in particular perhaps explained what his parables were all about. He taught in parables. This comes across in the three synoptic Gospels, where they pretty well say that that's how he taught. And he often explained the meaning of these parables to the inner circle who asked him, what was that about, the parable of the sower, for example. And Jesus sometimes gets a bit frustrated, it seems, with them because they were a bit dense and just didn't get it. So why parables? Well, let me give you just an example of teaching, if you like, from my own experience of working with children. I've done a lot of work during my ministry going into schools and taking assemblies. And I found after a few years of doing this that it was an interesting fact that I would tell some sort of story, often fairly pithy because there was limited time, to children, and they sat there wrapped up in the story, and it really caught their imagination. And then I'd say, well, of course this story means, and you could feel the entire assembly switching off. And I think Jesus chose to speak in parables because they linked everyday life to what he was trying to say, perhaps about the kingdom of God, usually about the kingdom of God. But he never explained it to the crowds. He left them to try and work it out for themselves, and that's really quite important, because if you give somebody a meaning, then they're stuck with that meaning. But if you tell them a story, they have to struggle and find a meaning for themselves. Another thing that's really rather strange is that Jesus tells the disciples that they are to be privy to the secrets of the kingdom of God. But outside, with the crowds, it's in parables, so they can hear but not understand. It's what New Testament scholars often call the messianic secret, that somehow or other those outside the inner circle are left sort of pondering it. And that's a difficult one to deal with, and perhaps we'll look at that a bit when we meet on Tuesday. Now, when we turn to John's Gospel, we get something really rather different. It's a series of accounts of people talking with Jesus, like Nicodemus, for example, or the woman at the well. And Jesus has an in-depth conversation with them, during which he teaches them certain things. One of the most outstanding parts of the Gospel is how it links to the Old Testament, because there are what are known as the I am statements in St. John's Gospel. For example, I am the good shepherd. I am the door of the sheep. I am the true vine. I am the bread of life, and so on. Now that links back to what happened with Moses at the burning bush, where he received his call from God to go and liberate the children of Israel. And Moses asked God, well, who are you? I can't just turn up and tell them this experience. I've got to know who you are. I've got to name this divinity that has confronted me. And the answer he gets is, I am who I am. Or you can translate the Hebrew, I will be who I will be. Now clearly, I think, the author of John's Gospel goes back to that kind of saying. And so Jesus links himself back to the I am saying. And John is saying the I ams are how God is in the person of Jesus. The I am is now incarnate in Jesus. And so if you want to know what God is like, you look at Jesus and his claims that I am the good shepherd, I am the true vine, etc. So how shall we conclude this brief introduction in Jesus as a teacher? Well, I think the four Gospels give us a rounded picture of how Jesus taught, both in story and in more complex concepts that he shared both with the disciples and other people that he encountered during his ministry. But again, we have to come back to the fact that all four Gospels, through the teachings of Jesus, call us to faith in the Word that was made flesh and dwelt among us.